Now I'd like to cover each chapter in a bit more detail for you. In the opening note, I established that knowledge is the result of reason applied to experience, where experience encompasses all human experience, including perception, thoughts, imagination, and emotion. So I established that reason applied to experience is the source of all knowledge. This is easy to do because experience is, after all that we have to work with. And because it's obvious that knowledge must be rational, for the opposite of rationality is irrationality, and irrationality in the extreme is insanity. But establishing that knowledge is the result of reason applied to experience doesn't say anything about the character of knowledge, other than that knowledge is rational. So in Chapter 1, I develop a theory of knowledge in which I precisely characterize the nature of knowledge. I achieve this by precisely characterizing mathematic, scientific, and technological knowledge, because we know that this purported knowledge is real knowledge. How do we know this? Because our daily survival depends on it. And since these types of knowledge exemplify the use of reason applied to experience, it follows that the resulting characterization applies to all knowledge. In Chapter 1, I also show that knowledge of the world is inherently probabilistic. And I show why this is intuitively correct, though most people have never stopped to realize it. I'd now like to take a moment to offer a note of historical perspective on this achievement of precisely characterizing knowledge. Theorists have been trying to precisely characterize knowledge since time immemorial, but until now no one has successfully fulfilled the goal. To make this point, I invite you to look up the name of Richard Rorty on the web. Richard Rorty was an acclaimed philosopher who asserted that after more than 2,000 years of searching for his theory of knowledge, none has been found that has won universal acceptance, so it's time to quit searching. I'm confident that if you read Chapter 1 of my book, you will agree that this search for a theory of knowledge has finally come to an end. Furthermore, you will see this theory of knowledge put to use throughout the entire book. So you'll come to understand knowledge, not only in terms of the abstract characterization presented in Chapter 1, but also in terms of actual use throughout the book. That was Chapter 1 on knowledge. In Chapter 2, I solved the most fundamental theoretical problems pertaining to reality. More specifically, I solved many long-standing problems, including the following. I proved that reality is non-deterministic, or, as I prefer to say, indeterministic. I prove that we are responsible for our decisions, and I show that both theism and atheism are rational. In Chapter 3, I address the most important concepts in Western religion, except for the concept of monotheism, which was covered in Chapter 2. So in Chapter 3, I address the ideas of heaven versus hell, divine incarnation, and divine revelation. I analyze these concepts to determine what is rational and what is not rational. In the process, I present detailed information relevant to the development of these concepts in world history, and I present a new model for dating the New Testament Gospels that establishes that the Synoptic Gospels, Mark, Matthew, and Luke, are overall highly reliable. In Chapter 4, I present a model of ethics, showing how a rational model of ethics must be developed. I show that ethical principles are not arbitrary, nor are they the result of divine revelation. Rather, like all knowledge, ethical principles are the result of reason applied to experience. Then I go on to apply the ethics model to a range of controversial ethical issues. In Chapter 5, I present a model of commerce, showing that a rational model of commerce is based on a rational model of ethics, which I established in Chapter 4. I prove that economic welfare is maximized in, and only in, a competitive market economy. But I go well beyond this to analyze fundamental issues in commerce and governance. In the chapter on commerce, I prove that democracy is an economic necessity, but that modern democracies lack the most fundamental feature that any democracy should have, namely, that government income should be limited by the citizen-controlled ceiling. You can find out about my effort to communicate this message at the following website, thepeoplesamendment.com. In Chapter 5 on Commerce, I present a theory of fiat money, or paper money, showing how a self-regulating system of fiat money can be implemented using market principles to replace the current monopolistic regulation by the Federal Reserve Bank. I go on to cover a range of controversial issues in government policy, and I close by establishing a rational model of taxation. Having presented a model of government in Chapter 5, in Chapter 6 I concentrate on the structure of American government. I present a detailed historical analysis of the cause of the Civil War, where I present facts and theoretical insights that I think most readers will find fascinating. I go on to propose constitutional amendments for addressing a number of concerns, including restructuring the Supreme Court, restructuring the presidential election procedure, establishing a sound procedure for secession, and correcting the criterion for citizenship by birth, which is poorly stated in Amendment 14. I also address controversial cultural issues, including the debate between proponents of evolution and proponents of intelligent design, which I resolve. Finally, in Chapter 7, I establish the meaning of human life. This is the ultimate goal of the book, and this I achieve in Chapter 7. Among the interesting results of Chapter 7, I prove that in order for an intelligent free agent to be able to realize meaning, they must have the feature of willpower, the ability to exert effort. And this feature in turn implies the possibility of suffering and death. You can get a feel for why this is true by visiting my website and looking at the topic of mortality in the proofs menu. In Chapter 7, I also cover the topic of afterlife, showing that the existence of God has nothing to do with afterlife, and proving that if there is afterlife, it must consist of an unending sequence of stages. I also prove that the strong anthropic cosmological principle implies that afterlife is likely, though it remains to be shown that the strong anthropic principle is part of our best model of reality. This is one of 3 technical problems that I don't solve in my book. However, I do establish that the results of this problem are irrelevant to our life on Earth. In Chapter 7, I also present a calendar system that is simple and exact, never losing synchronization with the seasons. And I present a new system for global time reckoning and a rational dating system. Finally, I close the chapter by reviewing the major theoretical insights that I establish in the book. And then I invite you, the reader, to redesign human life to improve it. I wish to close with a bit of perspective. To my knowledge, only 2 other theorists in world history have developed a comprehensive theory of human life. The first was the Greek theorist Aristotle, who lived in the 300s before Christ, while the second was the English theorist John Locke, who lived in the late 1600s. I believe that my comprehensive theory of human life surpasses that of Aristotle and that of Locke. And this should not be surprising, given the development in human experience and the development in human knowledge that have emerged since their lifetimes. For example, I put to use insights that have been developed by mathematicians in the last 200 years. Finally, I wish to say that in viewing these videos, please keep in mind that my book is filled with painstaking analysis of all of the issues, and that in these short videos I can present only highlights. The depth of analysis of these issues requires communication in writing, for it would be impossible to clearly present the precise arguments orally, and it would be impossible to clearly present all of the relevant details orally. In viewing these videos, if a question comes to your mind, I encourage you to contact me via my website, and if you'd like me to cover a particular topic in a video, please let me know. I will reply to any message that is sincere and respectful, unless the day eventually arrives where I'm overwhelmed with the amount of email I receive.